Hello, welcome to the secret behind fast analytics. Incidentally, I did not write the title or the little description that you read, and so that was done by someone at Tableau. I wrote it, but then somebody remarkified it and changed some of my wording. And so for example, I wouldn't give away the answer. So the secret behind fast analytics: skills, tools, and process. What's the secret now? There's no secret left, so thank you. I would also say that if you had read the first sentence of the description, the University of Michigan Health System's fast analytics uses a combination of skills, custom process, and tools which to improve business processes as well as educate colleagues about analysis. If you read that and still came today, you're far better people than I am. I would have probably... Anyhow, I want to thank you for coming to this discussion. I love this place, Seattle. It is... I'd been in other circumstances where I've given speeches. I went to... Anybody here been to Oracle Open World? Just one person. Okay, so 50, 60,000 people, it gets kind of crazy. I was speaking at one about 4 years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, and the weather there, first of all, you're spread out all over the city because it's crazy big and there's so many people. And we were staying at this hotel that was about 3 blocks from Moscone where I was speaking, and the weather was terrible. It was raining. It was one of these like San Francisco, just constant downpours. And so I headed down to the catch a cab place about a half hour before I was supposed to talk. But the problem was the city was so busy with people coming and going to these conference sessions that there was absolutely no way that I was going to get a cab. I'm standing there in a line of about 30 people long. The dude with the whistle, they stand in front of the hotel and blow the whistle. There's no cabs coming. The ones that come by are already full. And I'm standing there and wondering, am I going to have to, in my suit, run 3 blocks through a downpour and get to this speech and get up in front of a bunch of people like a drowned rat and talk? And it was crazy. I didn't know what to do. And so I'm standing in line, and the only reason the line's getting shorter is because the people in front of me are going back up to their room saying, the hell with it. So I'm standing in line. There's 2 people in front of me. It's like 10 minutes before I'm supposed to speak. And at this point, I'm a nervous wreck. And I look over, and around the corner, I see a cab just kind of inching out. And there's 2 people in front of me. And I look at the cab, and it's pouring. And I think, yeah, I'm going to be that jerk. And so I take off. I bolt down to the cab. I jump in the back, and I say, can you just get me to the Moscone? It's 3 blocks. Do me a solid. And the guy looks over his shoulder at me and he says, yeah, I'm already in transit. I said, look, you don't have anyone in here. Just get me there. Be a hero. Okay. Kind of solemn about it. And I'm figuring at this point, I don't care. I'm getting there. And so he drives me over to the Moscone, and I pull out a 10. I know it's like a $3.50 fare, but I pull out a 10. I'm going to give him a 10. And I say, what do I owe you? And he goes, forget it. It's on me. I said, no, seriously, I'm going to pay you. What do I owe you? And he looked over his shoulder at me and said, look, guy, I'm a pizza driver. At which point I realized that not only was the light on top of his car not a cab sign, but anyhow, he got me there. So, but the weather here, much better here. So welcome. I want to talk to you. We are a small group within the University of Michigan Health System that tried to do something innovative, tried to do something a little bit different from what we had seen over the years. And we've had some success with it, and I'd like to share a couple of the things that we've learned with you today. So first of all, this is a picture of the University of Michigan Health System, and that's exciting. So I want to give you a little background. First of all, fast analytics. We call our group Fast Analytics. We stole that from some marketing that, I don't know if Tableau still uses the term, but we stole it outright. Pablo Picasso said, good artists borrow, great artists steal. So, we'll skip that. They didn't want me to go into that. They told me that was not a good way. You know the song, right? So anyhow, let's talk about the University of Michigan Health System. It is 990 beds, about 3 hospitals, 120 clinics, 40 outpatient locations, and there are 26,000 employees, more or less, that work there. One of the interesting things in putting this presentation together was, I first put it together and I put down 1.9 million visits. Why? Because that's what's on the website. It's easy. You go to your company's website, you grab the data, you put it in. And 45,000 hospital stays. That's what it says on our website. Someone in marketing came to me about a week before this presentation and said, hey, I need some help with some numbers. So we took some billing data and some visit data and we threw it together in Tableau and realized that 1.9 is really 2.3 and that 45,000 is really 50. So I don't think they've updated the website yet, but this is more accurate information than what is on our website. Thank you, Tableau. Within the health system, and this huge group of 19 departments and all these different doctors and services, we have a group called Revenue Cycle. And Revenue Cycle, if you're not familiar with Revenue Cycle, is a combination of billing and collection, scheduling. There's a real good wheel here that kind of goes into the different steps. You got to capture the charges. It's way more complicated. When I first started working there, and it was in a different capacity, I had a boss tell me, take 6 months and just learn about, at the time it was professional billing, just learn about professional billing. And I had just come out of industry, and I said, 6 months? That's 2 product cycles. What are you talking about, 6 months? Well, 8 years later, I'm still learning about healthcare billing and healthcare revenue cycle because it is so complex. We deal with 140 different insurance companies. We deal with patient payments, with AR follow-up, posting, errors by the doctors, coding errors, all kinds of different complexities that I had no idea about. So revenue cycle, turns out it's way more complex than I thought. And so when we got there and started looking around, we were doing things like printing out 60,000 pages on paper of reports every month and sending them around to various departments. We quickly moved that at least online. We did a lot of other things like that that were very time-consuming and painful. Only because these processes had evolved over time. They've taken, the path of least resistance and people's best skills. People meant well, but they knew how to use Excel, and that's all they had. And so they created these monsters of process, and we saw some opportunity there. And so when it came time to retire our professional billing system, that's a whole nother story. We were moving to Epic. I don't have to go into that. Okay, so we're moving to Epic. We're getting rid of IDX. Anybody IDX? Yeah? 35 years we had been customizing this application. It did everything our customers wanted, exactly how they wanted to do it. So these processes had evolved over years, and the system supported it. So when we created this group called Fast Analytics, we had a mission, and that was, I had been very involved in the early stages of the Epic migration, and I understood from what I had seen that there was a big hole when it came to reporting and analytics. And at the same time, we had been looking at about 14 different BI analytics products. We had been going back and forth, but the one that kept coming to the top was Tableau. It just kept shining in all these areas in which we needed support and help. So we came up with this mission. We said we were going to provide reporting and analytics to revenue cycle, an area that really needed it. We needed to improve our performance, our costs, everything around it. But we also knew that from our environment, and this may or may not be true in your environment, we needed to focus on data discovery. We needed to find the data that was out there so we could use it. And that was a much bigger challenge than we ever imagined. We knew it was going to be hard, but it turned out to be harder. We knew we needed to integrate data. Because of the way that our organization functioned, there's 19 departments, there's deans, there's chairs, there's clinical department administrators. Everybody had their own little fiefdom, and everybody had their own little data connection and collection, and everybody had their own little way of doing business. And so we knew that we were going to have to integrate a bunch of junk that just didn't sit well together. So we knew data integration was going to be a big issue. And we've added this since, this process improvement. We didn't realize what a great tool Tableau was going to be for eliminating what we call spreadsheet wrangling or data wrangling. We didn't understand that at the time, but as we quickly got into this, we realized that we could eliminate a lot of the busy work that folks were doing with spreadsheets and other types of data moving data around. And so we added process improvement to our core services. And then, of course, if you do your job right, other people want what you have. And we were inundated with requests for help. Early on, we were able to do that. In fact, we had an outreach program where we were going to other departments outside of revenue cycle and completing work for them because we didn't have enough work yet in our department. That led to other problems in terms of crossing boundaries, but we ended up doing a lot of work later to simplify and provision Tableau for the rest of the institution. So we sat down and we said to ourselves, and I encourage you to do this as well, what are my goals? And the most important question to ask, and I can't stress this enough, is, and this applies to everything in life, including raising small children, what problem are you trying to solve? And once you answer that question, what I found is that you end up asking it again and again and again and again and again. I think I got one more again. Nope, that's it. And you really need to keep examining that question. We do it constantly because as you discover a new problem, it brings up additional problems. And so you have to keep working your way down. So that's just when you're setting goals, whether it's for a department or a specific project or a specific item within that project, what problem are you trying to solve is the best question you can ask. So we answered that with two answers. One was improve every aspect of healthcare because no job's too big, right? You can do all this neat stuff with billing data, and what you're going to find out is that the researchers are interested in that. We had some folks come to us from this ECMO study. It had nothing to do with our world. It was all about these ECMO devices are like little suitcases that they use to do CPR and give aid right away. It's 40% effective, where CPR is about 5% effective, but they cost about $250,000. So the question was, does this make sense? Should we take a chunk of our ER and reconnoiter it so it could be this ECMO area? And so for that, you needed a financial compelling argument. So we heard from folks like that. We heard from folks in psychiatry about length of stay. We heard from all different, we had our EVPMA come to us and say we needed a dashboard and we're going to go pay for it, but we heard you might be able to help us. So we had all different kinds of groups coming to us for help and understood that we could impact more than just revenue cycle. And also to facilitate a new era of understanding from the wealth of data we collect. I don't think people in the individual groups within our institution understand what rich information we have in these little archipelagos of these little islands of data all over the place. What happens when you connect it? But mostly, we wanted to make the world a better place. Okay, one person here watches Silicon Valley, right? Okay, two, sorry. All right. Wasn't funny. All right, so how are we going to do that? The most dramatic way that you can get people's attention is to eliminate their pain. So we had to sit down and figure out what are the most painful things around here. Accessing data. As you can imagine, in a large organization with all these different groups of controlling data, just finding it is difficult. I don't know if I see heads nodding. Finding data, understanding who owns it, who's the steward or who's the steward of the data is incredibly difficult. We had a situation where a very popular database, it took us, 3 weeks to figure out who the owner was. And this is not for a lack of trying. And once we found the person, they weren't really exactly sure that they were the owner. This is how things flow in large IT organizations. Elizabeth here is our PM extraordinaire and did that kind of track down. But seriously, this data hounding, finding the data that you need can be an incredibly challenging and difficult process in our organization. And then the getting permission to have access to it. I like to talk about the 1,000 points of no. Every time we end up asking for something, there's a reason why we can't have it. And once we eliminate that reason, there's another one. There's still a set of data in anesthesiology that we can't get our hands on. And it's a shame because once we have that data, we can do amazing things with it. So coming up with a plan to address finding and getting the data, and then just because you get it doesn't mean there's a data dictionary available. A lot of times you have to then go and delve in even deeper with your customers to find out all about it. So accessing data. The second piece, analyzing data. Okay, so we have the data. That's great, but is it all there? Is it accurate? Is it even updated on a regular basis? What is the periodicity of that? Something else you need to think about and focus on. And finally, okay, we have the data. We've built something in Tableau. Does anybody know about it? Marketing, communication, letting folks know what you're doing and where it is. Is what you've done compelling? Does it tell a story? And most importantly, and this is a huge issue for us and took a lot of time, can your folks use it? We find that we can put these dashboards in front of people and they don't have a clue as to what to do next once they're looking at it. And so we have a lot of difficulty getting folks to get engaged, but once they're engaged, keeping them interested, and keeping them tuned in to the tools that are at hand. And so these three areas were the main pain points that we wanted to eliminate. So we knew in our environment that we served an operational group that had very little experience in technical innovation. We were kind of red-headed stepchild in the department. We had all these different billing and collections folks who are focused in customer service staff that are focused on their mission, but they weren't really technical innovators. They were operational staff, and so what we were suggesting was a little bit foreign to them. You have to take them along slowly. We, in turn, were served by a larger IT organization that didn't really welcome our existence, let alone us thinking about things that they felt were in their purview, but they didn't really have the resources to provide or support. So I wouldn't say it's a hostile relationship, but it wasn't friendly, and it certainly we were seen as being underminers. And you know, the first discussions I heard were, oh, they've got this toy called Tableau, and then when it started to take off, we heard, oh, well, you know, they're just a little group, they can't really support much. And then now we have the same groups using our Tableau and calling us and asking for space on the server. So it's really come full circle, but you got to be ready for other people to cast stones. And they also had this kind of one-size-fits-all mentality. So our kind of agile approach to how we did business, and because we didn't sit down with a blank piece of paper and a pencil and, all right, what do you want? Every time we started a project, we weren't doing business the same way that they did. And so we knew that whatever we had to do, it had to be a lot better than what was going on, because if it was just a little better, it would be ignored. We knew our customers, they didn't know what was possible. They didn't understand the value of having, so we had situations where we had one report, but it was produced in 120 different ways because people wanted different slices, and that's how they got to their data. They didn't understand the concept of a dropdown. We had staff who had been working in IDX Character Cell for 30 years, and in 2006, we had to teach them how to use a mouse. That was a huge jump forward for them to use a mouse to maneuver through a screen rather than tabs and arrows. And so we were dealing with customers who didn't know what was possible, but what they did know was their business. And that's a key point here, is your customers do know their business, and you need to engage them at that level. We knew that we could eliminate this spreadsheet wrangling with simplifying technical processes. But when you tell somebody that what they spend 40 hours a week on is going away, they get really nervous. Fortunately, we have a really supportive organization that has more work than it can ever possibly accomplish in the course of a day. So there's always room for them to find new work, often much higher level work. We were using Tableau to remove the drudgery, to remove the copy it from here, paste it into here, and then take this and put it in a picture so the chairman can then show it to everybody in their weekly meeting. So, so that was another big lesson for us. We knew we had to teach them how to fish. We weren't going to be able to create Tableau dashboards for everybody. We were going to have to find some leaders in the organization and teach them how to use the tool and let them, vaya con Dios. You know, we needed to let them go off on their own and do what they needed to do. And then the final challenge that we understood were that everyone wanted their own dashboard. Dashboards, analytics, big BI, big terms, everybody wants it. But then when you sit down and talk to them, they really don't know what they want. So, frankly, we felt our customers needed to be shot, which stopped, helped, or trained, right? It doesn't, yeah. So, big takeaway: you have one shot to earn customer confidence. If you can do one thing in your first meeting with them, it's convince them that you know what you're doing, what you're talking about. We've done that through building a solid dog and pony. We show up and we have something to show them. One of the ways that we do that is obtain their data prior to our meeting and use it when we meet with them. We play with it a little bit. We can show up with something that looks pretty good. It may not be the answer to their prayers, but it gives them the understanding that we've looked at their data and we're trying to understand their business. The other thing it does, because customers often think that you're, oh, they're IT people, they don't get it. It helps them understand that you do kind of get it. You have an idea, but then you can work with it in front of them and show them in a very short time. This is where Tableau shines. You can show them in a very short time what's possible. And one of the ways that we did this, and again, going back to Pablo Picasso, if this works for you, steal it. We did something called a 1-hour challenge. And what we would tell folks is, give us your data and give us 1 hour. We'll have our programmers take an hour of their day and work with the data and come back and show you what's possible in our first meeting. And then we'll spend an hour going over it with you. And we've had tremendous results from that approach. One of the things that it does is it allows our leadership to think, okay, well, they're not spending that much time, helping folks get ramped up in here because you call it a 1-hour challenge. Now, in the end, you spend more than an hour because you have your initial meeting, you have your 1 hour, your second meeting. But what it does is it really puts this in your customer's face is that, look, in an hour, this is what we can accomplish. Our organization is, our IT organization is famous for, 6-month waterfall plans and 1-year projects that turn out to not go very far, very fast. So the concept of putting something out there in an hour, whether it takes you an hour or 5 hours or whatever, is very compelling. So if you like the term 1-hour challenge, steal it. One of the things I used to do in our dog and pony, you've all seen this graph before. I used to show up to help doctors and faculty, folks who aren't as in tune to data visualization and the tools that we have, understand the power of an image. I would show them this, Menard's classic picture of Napoleon's March on Moscow. And I would go into a lengthy discussion about how, at the beginning here, we have the thickness of this line represents 422,000 soldiers. And as they march through the winter and come through, they send a little group off to guard their back trail. They cross some rivers, lose a lot of guys. They finally get to Moscow fighting the cold, and they're repelled, and they come back. And if you think about it, I tried to speak compassionately and passionately about the thickness of the line here, going from 422,000 to about 12,000 men, and the loss of life, and what a dramatic, terrible, horrible event this was. And I'm giving this speech, and from the back of the room in a thick Russian accent, I hear, "Well, it depends on your perspective." And I realized at that time that there's always two sides to a story. So work with your customers, listen to them, and a few words to live by. And these are experiences that are very close and near and dear to our heart. Voltaire, our wretched species is so made that those who walk on the well-trodden path always throw stones at those who are showing a new road, which is a really fancy way of saying haters gonna hate. Malcolm Gladwell, innovation is mainly about saying yes. So earlier I talked about the 1,000 points of no. Innovation is about saying yes, and that can get you into trouble. It can get you in trouble by crossing boundaries you shouldn't cross. It could get you into trouble by agreeing to do things that are outside of your areas of expertise. Do it. Do it. Challenge yourself. Make it a little bit harder for yourselves, because that's where you grow, and that's where you maybe fail miserably, but that's okay too. We've had a couple of attempts and starts on projects where we had to back out and say, look, we just can't do it. Here's why. But don't be afraid to say yes. It's too easy to say no. And finally, I don't know who said this or if anybody ever did, but I like the saying, the best kind of innovation is covert. And I think that's another good, keep it on the down low. You don't have to broadcast everything. But if you're doing something a little risky, do it and then show the results before you start talking about it. And one last one, this is totally separate from me, but critical piece to keeping our team sane. Dr. Seuss, I like nonsense. It wakes up the brain cells. I'm sorry if you're... Okay, so you need to understand your landscape. What do you have control over? We were a very small group within an operational unit that was not part of any official IT organization. Again, kind of the red-headed stepchild. We looked carefully over all the different aspects of what we needed to do and quickly realized that data governance and infrastructure were not in our purview. We were not going to be able to impact that. In fact, there was very little in terms of data governance. It's only been in the last year that our institution has launched a significant effort to write and codify a data governance plan for our institution. Fortunately, one of their pre-assumed quick wins is going to be expanding Tableau to a larger group. How they do that, I don't know, but I'm trying to help them. So that's a good thing. But what we realized was that really the skills, the tools, and the process were what we had control over. So let's talk a little bit about the skills. I walked into an environment where we had been doing the same thing for 35 years. Let me state that differently. We were using the same application for 35 years. We had folks who were on our staff that had been doing the same thing for 18 years, 15 years, 12 years, and they were very invested in their role. They liked their title, they liked their little corner, they had their silo, and they did not want to be shaken from that. And yet, massive change was coming, and so we didn't have an option, but we still had that challenge. Part of the problem with roles and clinging to your role is that you end up not experimenting. You don't take on challenges. You don't take on risks. You don't say yes. You know what your job is. It's this box right here. Oh, I'm sorry, no, that's Jerry's work. His box is over here. That type of mentality, that silo mentality, is all too common. And by focusing on roles, you only further embed that in the organization. So it held people back. It forced senior level staff to perform menial tasks. Because when this is your silo, it doesn't matter if the task is up here or down here. I got to do it because it's my silo. I'm in charge of X. So you had people doing some very menial work, yet they were at senior levels. And so we knew that roles were an impediment to growth. So we tried to think about it a little bit differently. Oh, one thing I found just yesterday, I like this picture because it's team member contribution is not binary. It's a wide spectrum, and we had folks all over this gradient. The one thing I found is that when you hire or get a couple of folks to move towards the passionate innovation side of the scale, others will follow. So you don't need 50% of your team adopting the gospel. You need 20, 30% of the people to form a good solid core, and then the rest will come along. So don't be discouraged if you don't have a team that is all 100% on board. You can get them there, but you have to invest in the far end to kind of drag them over. I don't know who did this or who to give credit to. I found it on the internet. But I think it's a good way of thinking about your team's contributions. So it took time. It took time to get staff to start thinking about their skill set rather than their role. And skills, unlike roles, are harder to obtain. You have to actually do something to obtain a skill, whereas roles can be given to you. So you can be in charge of something and be just as bad as the next guy, but to be skillful at it is much more difficult. Getting your staff to think, what are the skills that are needed to succeed in this environment? In our case, this new environment, is very important. And it takes time and effort, and you have to give folks that space. We have to give folks time to acquire the skills, to use them with the training wheels on, and experiment and make mistakes, and be patient as leaders. Be patient to ensure that they get a chance to not only create the new skill, but to polish it and be good at it. You also need to make sure that there are opportunities for people who do that. So you can't leave them in the drudgery once they've gathered these new skills. You got to get them to use them and show the value to the rest of the organization. It's all about getting people to the other side of that spectrum. showing them the value of gaining new skills. And finally, I would like to think that as a manager, I can motivate people and get people to adopt these new things. I like to think that in speaking to them the right way and helping them a certain way, my style will help them come along and see the light. But what I found out is that no matter how good any one person is, it often takes multiple styles and skills to move folks along that spectrum. And a couple of moderate performers who I could not get to really adopt and adapt under different leadership did do much better and have now become really strong contributors to our organization. So it's not a matter of shame or embarrassment to admit that you can't motivate everybody and that it might be somebody else in your organization who's good at that. And so look around, see who else can help with that mission because everyone's style is different and everybody responds to different styles. So when we started looking at Tableau in our environment, we started to attempt, at least, to understand the skills that would be of value to our organization. And the one that's nearest and dearest to my heart, because I do it often, is the idea that you need to interview and help visualize the future for your customers. You have to help them understand what's possible through the tools that you're using and the processes that you're adopting and lead them down that path. So one person needs to play that role. Another person has to be the project manager. You need an operational type person that leads and organizes and, most importantly, bugs the living daylights out of people who don't respond, because it is so easy to lose track of what you need to do in these projects, because as a contributor, not my team contributors, but our customers' contributors, the subject matter experts, they all have day jobs. They're very busy, and so oftentimes we need to be very insistent on them getting back to us in the time frame that they've committed. So project management is critical to keeping things moving along. Tableau developer, I don't need to go into that. We all know how incredibly fun that is, and so you need those folks. And finally, we found that we needed other types of developers. We have Oracle, we have SQL, we have all kinds of different technologies that we need to get at in order to get information out of the data. So those were the skills of value we determined. But roles are always going to come back, and people are always going to have a role. They're not going to say, oh, I work for the university and here are my skills. They're going to say, I am a blank. And so when you do fall back into having to define roles for your staff, try to keep them simple, try to keep them agile, flexible. We use project manager, Tableau developer, and what we call the fast analytics facilitator. And then that way it's an easy little trio of people who show up at the meeting, and it's easy to understand for our customers, help them walk through the process. Tools. We use a ton of different tools, but I'm just going to focus on the three that I think are most critical. You need to be able to track tickets and track your projects and include all the detail in it. I am surprised and alarmed at how many groups I've helped at the university. I've been called in to help other IT groups, small IT groups, get their operations in shape. And the first thing I do is sit down and find out how many different ways they collect their requests for service. And it generally averages between 10 and 20, including walk-up, sticky note on the monitor, email, phone call, fax. There's just a million different ways. It is incredibly distracting and difficult to do work that way. If you don't have a ticketing project management software in place, I would encourage you to implement that first off. We use Jira. It's very malleable, which is both its strength and weakness. In order to make Jira work exactly how you want, you have to do a lot of work to get it there. Out of the box, it works really well. But again, it's a complex tool that can be as customizable as you want. Brainstorming is the most critical piece of the work that we do. When we go out and meet with a customer for the first time, we need a way of tracking our conversation, organizing the thoughts, and preserving them for future conversations. And finally, Tableau is our key to making the world a better place. So Jira is this tool by Altson. It was an open source tool. It's fairly inexpensive. I think it's about $2,000 for a license, for a server license. But it gives you the opportunity to organize your work into projects and gives you very clear methods for attaching documents and correlating and linking and keeping track of all the different aspects of your project and workflow. You can model your workflow in it and keep things on a path that you can't deviate from. It's open. It's now pending. It's now open again. There's a limited number of paths that you can follow with these projects and tickets, so it allows you to enforce your process programmatically. A brainstorming tool, a good brainstorming tool like NovaMind will allow you to capture the thoughts in your meetings and discussions with your customers and document them for future reference. So in this example, we met with our coding folks. We talked this first level where, let's see if I can do this right. Our first level was just discussing all the different possible opportunities we had. We decided that productivity was the most important thing to them at the time. And so we started talking about different things like reports and data, and the conversation just flowed from there. They could tell us everything about their business, but they didn't really see it this way. They saw it as, how they go through their process in their head. When we put it down on paper in a methodology like this, it helps them understand both their process and maybe where we should focus. And also, and this is a critical component I'll talk about in a minute, it allows you to divide and conquer all the different problems that you're going to come up against in your discussion with your customers, and then focus on the little problems that you have control over first for some big wins. So having a brainstorming tool and walking through a conversation and documenting it as you go like this is a very powerful image. And then when we're done, we print PDF and send them a copy. Is this what we talked about? Wow, yeah, this is exactly what we talked about. We come back to this document in the next conversation and we use it as the conversation starter. So it's a powerful tool. And then finally, I guess I didn't do a slide on Tableau because we all know why we're here, so not necessary. So tool choice is important. We spent 2 years looking at 14 different data analytics tools before we chose Tableau. In fact, we'd just gotten a new head of purchasing in our organization who was, I'd known the old head of purchasing, and so if I had gone to him and said, hey, I want to spend some money on Tableau, it would have been fine. Now there was, RFP. Well, I don't want to do an RFP. I just spent 2 years looking. Okay, so you have to fill out this sole source document and prove to us that you've done the work and that this is the only solution. I'm like, I can do that. And I sat down and recounted the last 2 years of work, and we were actually awarded the first sole source first sole source approval out of this new empire of purchasing. And we're very proud of that. So it was actually used a couple of years later when the university wanted to buy Tableau too for the same purpose. So to this date, the University of Michigan has not written an RFP for a data analytics tool, and I'm very happy about that. You need to educate your leadership. This is an area I probably didn't spend enough time on initially, and you can train or you can support. This was one of those things where I should have spent more time on the training, but ended up doing it in the support. Educate your leadership. Let them know that it doesn't matter what the tool costs. Your time is going to be much more expensive in the long run. And if this tool shaves 5% of your time off every week, it's a big win. If it shaves 10, 20, 30, it's huge. It pays for itself. So have that discussion with your leadership. But just picking a tool and training folks isn't enough. You need compelling reasons for them to adopt the tool. So you do need to walk them down the first couple of steps down that path and get them to understand the power of the tool. And finally, getting back to our earlier point, find the pain points and demonstrate how these tools can alleviate the pain. Once you put that in front of somebody, the tool becomes a non-issue. It becomes, okay, what can you do for me now? How can you relieve a different point of pain? And it's amazing how an initial discussion like this won't always get to those pain points. It'll get you a cursory understanding of their business, but that's about it. You need to do the work, show them, And then they get it. They start getting it. They start seeing what a drop-down can do compared to 12 different reports. They get to see what some of the power of Tableau unleashes for you, and it becomes it takes on a life of its own. So the next piece I wanted to talk about just briefly is process. I'm not going to get into a long discussion of agile versus waterfall and the spectrum in between. Build something nimble, simple, and flexible. The simpler, the better, because this is where Tableau shines. We try to focus on being fast to results initially, getting the folks on board, and then you can slow down after that. But whatever your process is, it should be fast, it should be iterative, and it should be fast. And once again, it should be fast. You need to get people to an answer right away. You need to show them that this isn't going to be a 6-month period. It's not going to be the painful experience that they've had with other IT organizations, and that your group can do it. You can do it faster. You can do it quicker. All right, so that's all I'm going to say about process. What I am going to say is, here's what worked for us. If you help your customers grasp the power of the tools, they will become your best friends. We lose sight of the fact that we're IT folks or that we're technical folks and that we get this stuff. We are experimental clickers. We're not afraid to break stuff. In fact, we take pride in breaking things, if you're anything like me. I love sending in a bug report to a company and saying, you got to fix this. Our customers are generally not like that in healthcare. They know their business, but they're not IT people, and they're really afraid of breaking things, like the mouse that they're using for the first time. So, you got to help people along that first few steps. Learn your customers' data and their business while you help them learn about the tools. You have to present this to them as a win-win. You have to help them understand that you are going to share a goal day one. You are working with them as a team. This is not about us providing service. This is a two-way street. We need to learn your business. We need to learn your data. But while we're doing that, we want you to understand our tools better. So when we do this, the second and third and fourth iteration, we all get better at what we're doing. And it's not just us helping you, it's you helping us as well. And when you put it in that way, and you talk to them as if you're a team, it has a lot of positive psychological effects on how they react to you and how they interact with you going forward. This is, I think, the biggest issue that teams don't do well in our environment. You need to break big problems into little ones. You need to, and this is, I know this is common sense, and some of you may be thinking, yeah, I know, but do it. Break them into little problems. Break the big ones into little ones, and then do it again and again and again until you have problems that are so small and so simple you can iteratively solve them with a quick dashboard and have some results, show them results, and you get a little win maybe, not a big win, but that little win will fuel a medium win, which will fuel patience for a larger win. And by doing that, you have the luxury of solving easy problems initially, and if that momentum is still there, move on to the next phase of the project. People grow bored. People get cynical if things take too long. That's why we like the 1-hour challenge. We can solve problems in an hour and literally do it in front of their eyes. And I don't know if your institution is anything like ours. I've heard it said that if you've seen one academic medical facility, you've seen one academic medical facility, because they all have very different leadership models. They all have, unlike corporations with one CEO, they have many little CEOs. We have at least 5 CIOs in the health system. 5. One's medical, one's cancer, but 5. One's health system, one is medical school. 5 CIOs. I don't know if they meet and have regular discussions, but I'd like to listen to them. But ignore your boundaries until you can. Because if you do ignore your boundaries, you'll have more opportunities to say yes and get yourself into trouble, which works out one of 2 ways. You do something amazing and innovative, or you fail. Either way, you've tried and you move forward. Here's what worked for us. 1-hour challenge, brainstorming. From that brainstorming, we isolate a series of problems, fix them one at a time. build it out. It's not complex. It's not super fancy. It's nothing earth-shattering. But again, keeping it simple is the best advice I think I can give. And with that, I will end early, I think, a bit early, and open it up to questions. In the back. I'm sorry, what's your name? Matt.
From Upper Peninsula.
UP or A?
Yeah.
You going out for pasties after?
I think so.
Hey.
I work for a health plan. We have all 15 counties in the Upper Peninsula under our umbrella. And we have, I think we're a microcosm of what you guys have, minus the education piece. What was the most challenging thing when you were rolling out Tableau dashboards to like your clinical department? And when I'm aligning those with when you said customers when you were talking, that's pretty much
Those are our customers, yes.
they're just different departments.
Yeah.
What was the most challenging thing? And as far as any, you guys, would you be willing to share any of the training documents that you've produced, or is that proprietary?
Well, I'd have to think about that for a second. Let me take on the first part of your question, which was what was the hardest part of bringing this forward? I think, convincing folks that we actually could have an impact. Brief story: we had an analytics meeting. The CIO of the health system called an analytics meeting to get together and discuss what was going to happen in the future, because Epic was bringing in this new analytics tool, and they wanted everybody to abandon their current innovative approach and take the massive product under their wings and use that to be deployed sometime in 2015. And this was a year ago. So we said, we went to this, and I found it very interesting that out of all the groups that were asked to speak and discuss what they were doing, we weren't even mentioned. I think there was a real lack of credibility given to our group. One, because of its size, and two, because we were just from this, we're from revenue cycle. We're not an IT organization. So gaining credibility, I think, was the biggest challenge. And that occurred just by doing, by putting things out there that kind of went beyond what was available. Tableau helps us do that very well. And so after people started seeing it, we had one big break, which was, not big break, but one big application that went out to all the physicians, an RVU application that I know and a couple of you had mentioned, you saw in the description. I can maybe give a quick demo of that. But it was an app that the docs get to see their RVUs. What are they producing? What did they do? How much did they earn? Because compensation in some of the departments is based on it. It's a big, important thing in our institution. So by having that larger audience of physicians and having physicians come to administrators and say, hey, this is a really cool tool, that helped with our credibility. So reaching out and providing a service actually is what did it. So.
So do you imagine a future state where you're empowering the different departments to embed an analyst and build their own dashboards?
So we have. We've found, that's a good question. The question was, do we envision a future where other people, where we've taught people to fish? And the answer is, yeah, there's some folks who saw it, got it, and grabbed onto it. We have 19 or 20 different departments now using Tableau outside of revenue cycle. And like I said, we provision the service and then walk away. And they have gone forward. There's one group that is working with Blue Cross, this Michigan data, it's statewide, and they're providing services to other health systems across the state. We have other groups that are using it for research, other groups that are using it for clinical education. We had one physician who got really excited, took the tool, and did so accreditation is a big issue for students, making sure that in his case he's a brain surgeon, he's a neurosurgeon, and making sure that the students had all of the requisite types of operations under their belt to graduate was always a problem. He took the spreadsheet, plugged it into Tableau, and then started playing with it. And he has, oh, this, you can see on a graph, this dude ain't going to make it to graduation because he's falling below the average, he's falling below the curve. So we've seen that, and it's been adopted widely, and it's one of the reasons why in this effort to create a data governance session in our organization, they've looked at Tableau as like a quick win because so many people are already using it.
Hey, John.
Yes?
Can you tell the group the leadership role you guys have taken with the Tableau user group and how you've really shown some of the great uses of Tableau through your user group?
Sure. So that's one other thing we did to further that goal. We created it's a horrible name. It's the University of Michigan Tableau Users Group, which it's embarrassing. I don't like using it, but the group itself has met twice. We have another meeting on the 17th, and Monte and one other Tableau employee will be there. We just sit down and show them some of the things that we've created, different ways of using the tool, and our first meeting we had like 135 people show up in the institution. We also helped main campus when they were ready to buy and install their server. So yeah, we've done a lot of outreach, and having a user group that meets on a quarterly basis is a great way of helping others kind of get the gospel and move forward. So, yes?
How have you or have you dealt with people's concerns of having PHI available or not available and all those?
That's a challenge. So one of the things that we've done to ensure our security and adherence to HIPAA and all the other types of regulations that we need to adhere to. Oh, by the way, folks, if you get a chance as you're walking out, take the session survey, please, for me. Thank you. Even if you didn't like it, let them know as they walk out the door. No, so one of the things we did was ensure that our server with which we host Tableau is in a lockdown network. So you can't get to our server without having access to the lockdown hardcore University of Michigan health system network. You can VPN into it, but you have to have credentials. The other thing we did was we connected our Tableau service into our Active Directory infrastructure, and we use LDAP to adhere to permissions. One of the nice things about that is we get a username, and so we can match the username with, for example, a doc profile. So when we went to do this RVU dashboard, we only have one dashboard. The doc goes to it and only sees his data based on his login credentials. They also like it because they don't have another login. Once they log into their workstation, they don't have to log in a second time to get into Tableau. So those two things have put us in a position where we're comfortable with our security, and we can do things like ensure that doctors don't see their neighbors' RVU values, which is pretty much like giving them access to their bank account. They wouldn't like that at all. So thank you. That's a good question. Are there any other questions? Yes?
I have a challenge where they take their data and they take their business logic, create a visual based on what they say. But when it goes public, other people challenge it doesn't represent them yet. So what I try to do is make them own the logic rather than see me as the source. Do you encounter some similar
Yes.
tips?
Absolutely. So in other words, when it comes to the final results, you're not the business owner. You don't understand. You built it, but you don't necessarily understand it. I think part of our philosophy is that gaining that understanding as you go through the process with your customer is helpful, because then you can act as an agent, and I would recommend that. But also, I understand it. I get it. We are fortunately, we're a small enough group. There's only 700 people in revenue cycle. We can usually pull it back in and have that conversation in a friendly environment. But I understand the challenge. It's tough. It's tough because you want to do your work, but you also don't want to become the business owner of it as well.
Yeah, and I'm just taking what they say, so whether that's the truth or not.
Yeah.
You're
So. Anything else?
When you talk about getting the data, you talked about a variety of data sources. Is there an infrastructure, a data warehouse, some kind of underlying data platform that you're plugging into, or are people, just going off for wherever it lives?
So there is a data warehouse that I think our leadership is forcing them to stop calling it a data warehouse and start calling it the the clinical and financial data mart, because it's not a data warehouse. We also have a group of doctors that created, and researchers that have now created their own research data warehouse. We have all kinds of little departmental and spreadsheets and everything all over the place. And so, so yeah, there's a wide variety of different types of data and data points, access points that we have tried to coordinate. But yeah, it's impossible to go to a single place and find everything. Sure. Yes?
Talk about your, I'm going to call it a client service model, kind of the three-part team that addresses questions. Do you differentiate from that if you're getting asked to do, it sounds like most of the tools that you're building are ongoing dashboards that will run over time. Do you also get asked to do ad hoc, answer this?
Oh, yeah.
That I have today, and do you staff that differently, or do you approach it differently?
Well, it depends, because a lot of times we hear those questions and it leads to, oh my God, why are you asking this, and how are you doing it now? And with a very little amount of work on our part, we could save you hours and hours and hours, literally hundreds of hours a year in staff effort through a process improvement. So yes, but we're always trying to keep our eye on the big picture. How can we make our organization more efficient? How can we reduce the cost of providing healthcare? Thank you all for coming. I really appreciate it. My biggest fear was showing up to an empty room, so I appreciate it. Thank you.